All right, so are you ready to explore some ancient wisdom?
Oh, always ready for that.
Okay, well, good, because today we're going deep into Patanjali's Yoga Sutras.
Hmm. The roadmap to the mind.
Exactly. We've got this awesome YouTube lecture from Shrivanam.org. It gets into some pretty heavy stuff about consciousness and perception and reality.
Yeah, those are some pretty big topics.
And luckily, I've got, you hear our expert in Eastern philosophy and all things meditative to break it down.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I always love unpacking these ancient ideas. They still resonate today.
For sure. So right off the bat, the lecture mentions these terms, chitta and vritis.
Hmm.
I'll admit those were not in my everyday vocabulary before this.
Yeah, they sound a little intimidating, maybe, but they're actually pretty fundamental to yoga philosophy.
Okay.
So chitta basically refers to the mind stuff, like the whole of your mental experience. You can think about like a lake, capable of being perfectly still. But then you've got the vritis, which are like the ripples and waves on the lake. Those are the thoughts, the emotions, sensations, all those mental fluctuations that are, caused by the world around us.
Okay. I'm starting to get the picture. So if I'm trying to meditate and I suddenly remember that super embarrassing thing I said back in high school, it was like, afridi, disturbing my chitta.
Exactly. And, those waves just keep crashing, disrupting that peaceful lake. That, according to yoga philosophy, is really at the root of our suffering.
Mm.
We get so caught up in, identifying with the waves, that we totally forget about that stillness beneath.
It's like we're on a mental roller coaster, constantly just reacting to those ups and downs.
Yeah.
No wonder we feel stressed. But if it were that easy to just remember the stillness, we'd all be enlightened,
No,
right?
Right. There's a bit more to it than that. The lecture dives into the different qualities or tendencies that color our mental state. These are known as tamas, rajas, and sattva.
Okay, hit me with it. What are those all about?
All right, so tamas first. Tamas is associated with dullness, inertia, negativity. Think about those days where you feel completely unmotivated, maybe even a bit down. That's tamas creeping in.
Oh, I know Thomas all too well. Some days it's a struggle just to get off the couch. So what's next?
All right, so next up is rajas. Think action, passion, desire. That's that energy that you feel when you're pursuing a goal, that excitement when you're working on something you love. But too much rajas can lead to restlessness, anxiety, even aggression. It's all about finding the right balance.
Makes sense. Everything in moderation, right? So what's the ideal state then?
There'll be sattva, the quality of purity, clarity, and peace. So that feeling of tranquility, balance, wisdom. Imagine the calm after a storm, that sense of inner peace and knowing.
Okay, yeah. Sattva definitely sounds like where it's at.
Yeah.
So according to yoga philosophy, is the goal to just live in a constant state of sattva?
In a way, yeah. The idea is, by understanding these different qualities of mind, we can start to cultivate more sattva and create a more peaceful internal landscape. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that actually ties into another really fascinating point that the lecture makes. It claims that our senses aren't actually the ones doing the perceiving.
Wait, if my senses aren't perceiving, then what is?
That's where the concept of the true self comes in.
Okay.
Purusha in Sanskrit.
Okay.
So think about it this way. Imagine an oyster that gets irritated by a grain of sand and creates a pearl as a reaction. The sand represents the true universe, and the pearl is our perceived reality.
So my senses are like the oyster, just reacting to the world and creating my own individual pearl of reality.
Exactly.
That's a wild thought. So there's a whole other world beyond what I can see, hear, touch, taste, smell.
Exactly. Our senses are just tools, right? Like windows that let in a limited amount of light. What's really fascinating is what lies beyond those windows.
So if our senses are so limited, how do we even begin to understand this true universe that's out there?
That's where yoga practice comes in. The lecture talks about the concept of samskaras, which are basically like these mental grooves or impressions left on the mind by our past actions, thoughts, and experiences.
So every experience we have just kind of shapes our mind, creating these grooves.
Exactly.
It's kind of like, when a potter molds clay and leaves behind these unique marks that just contribute to the final form.
Exactly. And, the lecture emphasizes that these samskaras can be both positive and negative. Positive samskaras lead to helpful actions and thoughts, while negative ones lead to unhelpful ones.
So it's like our past experiences are just constantly influencing our present state of mind, shaping how we perceive and react to the world.
Right.
That's both empowering and kind of scary, isn't it?
It is. But the good news is yoga offers tools to help us deal with those negative samskaras and cultivate, more positive ones. It's all about kind of weakening the grip of those negative patterns through consistent practice
Okay.
and a little something called non-attachment.
Okay, now non-attachment, that sounds a bit tricky. Does that mean I have to give up everything I enjoy and like become a monk or something?
Not necessarily. It's more about cultivating like a mental detachment from the things that cause us suffering,
Right.
whether those are possessions, relationships, or even our own thoughts and emotions.
Okay, so it's about changing my relationship to those things rather than like getting rid of them completely.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that true happiness and fulfillment don't come from chasing, external things, but from cultivating a sense of inner peace and contentment.
That makes a lot of sense. But how do we actually practice this non-attachment thing?
Well, the lecture highlights two key practices, abhyasa and vairagya. So abhyasa means consistent, dedicated practice, like meditation, ethical living, or any kind of spiritual discipline that helps us cultivate awareness and self-control. Think of it like training a muscle, right?
Mm-hmm.
The more you practice, the stronger it gets.
So it's not like a quick fix, but like a journey of self-discovery and like continuous improvement.
Exactly.
Okay.
And vairagya, which translates to a non-attachment, is all about letting go of that clinging and grasping that creates so much suffering.
Yeah. But the lecture also mentions that even good qualities can become attachments.
Yeah.
How does that work?
It's a little subtle, but important. Even positive qualities, when we cling to them too tightly, can bind us to the cycle of suffering, right? So imagine someone who's incredibly generous,
Hmm.
but becomes attached to the praise and recognition they receive for their generosity. That attachment can lead to disappointment and suffering when the praise isn't there.
So it's not just about being like a good person, but about acting from a place of like genuine selflessness without getting attached to the outcome.
Precisely.
Mhm.
It's about recognizing that true fulfillment comes from within, not from that external validation.
Right, right. This all connects to another point in the lecture that I found really intriguing, that emphasis on controlling the breath, pranayama. Like,
Right?
how does that fit into the whole picture?
Well, pranayama is a really powerful tool for calming the mind and preparing it for like deeper states of concentration.
Okay.
When you control the breath, you're controlling the flow of prana, that's the vital life force in your body.
Hmm.
This, in turn, can really help regulate your emotions, reduce stress, and enhance your mental clarity.
It's like hitting the pause button on that mental chatter that's constantly running in the background.
Yes, exactly. It creates a space of stillness within, which is really essential for cultivating awareness and insight.
Okay.
And this leads us to one of the most powerful and ancient practices in yoga, the repetition and meditation on the sacred syllable, Om.
Okay, yeah. Om. That's a big one. I've always been kind of curious about its significance. I mean, beyond just being like a cool sound. There's got to be more to it than that, right?
Oh, it's much more than just a sound.
Okay.
The lecture explains that Om is considered the primordial sound, the vibration from which, like all other sounds, originate. It's like the key that unlocks a deeper level of understanding.
So repeating and meditating on Om can actually help us connect to something bigger than ourselves.
It is, and it's a practice that's been used for centuries by, yogis and spiritual seekers from all walks of life. The repetition of Om can purify the mind, awaken spiritual awareness, and help us connect to that, like, underlying unity of all things.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. So we've got these tools, controlling the breath, meditating on Om, cultivating non-attachment, all kind of aimed at helping us navigate those ups and downs of life and tap into that deeper reality beyond our senses. But the lecture also talks about a whole bunch of obstacles that can, pop up along the way. What are some of those, and like, how do we deal with them?
Yeah, you're right. The path isn't always smooth sailing.
Right.
The lecture lists a bunch of obstacles like, doubt, laziness, attachment to sensory pleasures,
Yeah.
even falling asleep during meditation.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. I've had my fair share of meditation naps. But, if these obstacles are so common, how do we avoid, like, getting tripped up by them?
Well, what's interesting is how the lecture frames these obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't see them as personal failings, but as natural phenomena that just arise in the mind.
Hmm.
So instead of beating ourselves up when they come up, we can kind of view them as opportunities for growth.
So it's like those weeds that keep popping up in the garden.
Yeah.
Just got to keep pulling them out and tending to the soil.
Exactly. And the lecture offers some pretty practical advice on, how to deal with specific obstacles. For example, when doubt creeps in, it encourages us to reflect on our own experiences
Mm.
and the wisdom of those who've, walked the path before us.
So kind of like remembering why we started this journey in the first place.
Exactly. And then when it comes to laziness, a big one for a lot of us,
Yeah.
the lecture reminds us that, enthusiasm and energy are really essential for any spiritual practice, right? It suggests finding ways to make the practice enjoyable and meaningful,
Okay.
whether that's connecting with, like-minded individuals, exploring different techniques, or simply reminding ourselves of the benefits we're seeking.
So finding what works for you and keeping that spark of inspiration alive. But what about those moments when we actually do like touch into that stillness, that sense of peace and clarity? How
Hmm.
do we hold on to that experience and integrate it into our daily lives?
That's a great question. One way is to simply savor those moments, allowing the positive feelings and insights to really sink in.
Mm.
You can also try to bring that same quality of awareness and presence to your everyday activities, whether you're walking, eating, or interacting with others.
So it's about bridging the gap between our inner and outer worlds, letting that peace and clarity we cultivate in meditation kind of ripple outward into our daily lives.
Precisely. It's about making that inner transformation a lived experience. And this brings us to one of the most profound concepts in yoga philosophy, samadhi, a state of intense meditative absorption.
Okay, samadhi, that sounds pretty intense. What exactly does that entail, and how do we even begin to approach such a state?
Well, samadhi is often described as a state of deep concentration, where the mind becomes completely absorbed in the object of meditation.
Hmm.
And in this state, the usual fluctuations of thoughts and emotions subside. And there's this sense of deep peace, clarity, and unity.
So it's like finally reaching that calm lake beneath all the waves.
Yes.
That sounds amazing, but also a bit daunting. Is that something that everyone can achieve, or is it just for like super advanced yogis?
Well, the lecture actually describes different types of samadhi, each with its own unique characteristics. There's Savichara Samadhi, which involves contemplation and reflection, and Nirvichara Samadhi, which is characterized by complete transcendence of thought.
So there are like different levels or stages of samadhi. Is there like an ultimate level, the peak of the samadhi mountain?
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting. The lecture talks about this idea of seedless samadhi, a state where all those mental impressions or seeds are completely extinguished.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine your mind like a perfectly still lake,
Mm-hmm.
reflecting the vastness of the universe,
Mm.
No ripples, no distortions, just pure awareness.
Yeah.
That's the idea behind seedless samadhi.
Wow. Okay, that's a pretty powerful image. But how do we even like wrap our minds around that kind of experience? Is it even possible for us, ordinary folks?
The lecture suggests that it is,
Yeah.
though it's a rare and advanced attainment.
Okay.
It's considered the ultimate goal of yoga, a state of complete liberation, where the individual self merges back into the universal consciousness.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
So we've got these different types of samadhi, seedless samadhi being, the ultimate goal. But even getting to those initial stages of samadhi sounds incredibly challenging.
Right.
So what are like some of the common pitfalls that people encounter on the path to samadhi?
Right.
And how can we like avoid them?
Well, one common obstacle is simply the busyness of our modern lives.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in that constant stream of distractions and demands,
Yeah.
leaving little time or energy for, inner explorations. We're always on, constantly bombarded with information and stimulation.
Yeah, it's tough to find that like inner stillness when you're constantly being pulled in like a million different directions. Any advice on, how to carve out that space for ourselves?
Well, it's about finding ways to prioritize your inner well-being, even amidst all the chaos.
Hmm.
Maybe it's setting aside a specific time each day for meditation,
Okay.
even if it's just for a few minutes. Or it could be incorporating mindfulness practices into your daily routine, like paying attention to your breath while you're walking or eating.
So it's about finding those little pockets of stillness throughout the day rather
Yeah.
than like waiting for a big chunk of uninterrupted time.
Exactly. Another common pitfall is approaching meditation with a goal-oriented mindset.
Oh, yeah. We might get frustrated when we don't experience immediate results
Right.
or when our mind wanders incessantly. It's like we're trying to force it instead of allowing it to unfold naturally.
To that whole effortless effort thing.
Right.
Easier said than done.
Absolutely. It takes practice and patience. And it's important to remember that meditation is a practice, not a performance. you know?
Right.
There will be days when it feels easy and effortless and other days when it feels like a struggle. The key is to simply keep showing up
Yeah.
without judgment or expectation.
So being kind to ourselves throughout the process. But what about those moments when we do manage to, like, touch into that stillness, that sense of peace and clarity?
Hmm.
How do we hold on to that experience and, like, integrate it into our daily lives?
That's a great question. One way is to simply savor those moments.
Allowing the positive feelings and insights to, like, really permeate your being. You could also try to bring that same quality of awareness and presence to your everyday activities, whether you're walking, eating, or interacting with others. It's about bridging the gap between your inner and outer worlds, letting the peace and clarity you cultivate in meditation ripple outwards into your daily life.
I love that. Letting that inner peace ripple outwards. It's like taking that meditative awareness off the cushion and into the real world. But the lecture also talks about these like advanced yogis who can supposedly control the elements, levitate, and even read minds.
Mhm.
Are these just like mythical stories, or is there some truth to these claims?
Yeah, it's a realm that's often shrouded in mystery and skepticism. While there are certainly, many exaggerated or fabricated accounts, there's also a body of anecdotal evidence and traditional teachings that suggest the possibility of, extraordinary abilities developing as a result of advanced yoga practices.
So it's not something that we should just dismiss out of hand, but also not something we should blindly believe without, critical examination.
Exactly. It's important to approach these claims with both an open mind and a healthy dose of discernment. But ultimately, the most important question is, what's the purpose of these powers?
Right. Like if someone could actually levitate or read minds, what would be the point? What would they do with that ability?
That's where things get really interesting. Because the lecture suggests that while these powers might seem alluring, they can actually become obstacles on the path to true liberation.
Wait, really? So instead of focusing on like gaining superpowers, we should be focusing on something else entirely. But what would be more important than having superpowers?
Well, because remember, the ultimate goal of yoga is not to gain power over the external world, but to realize our true nature as, pure consciousness,
Right.
free from all limitations.
Okay.
So those powers, while impressive, could actually just distract us from that deeper goal.
It's like we're getting sidetracked by shiny objects instead of focusing on the real prize.
Exactly. And the lecture even mentions that some yogis, despite attaining these remarkable powers, they fall short of true liberation because they become attached to these abilities.
Hmm.
It's a cautionary tale that reminds us to stay focused on the ultimate goal, inner freedom and self-realization.
Wow. That's a pretty profound message. It's like a reminder that true power lies in inner freedom, not like external control. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from understanding the mind and its fluctuations to exploring the power of Om and, the challenges and rewards of that path to Samadhi. Where do we go from here?
Right.
What are some of the like key takeaways from this part of the lecture?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that the mind is a powerful tool, but it can also be our biggest obstacle.
Hmm.
By understanding how the mind works, we can start to, like, break free from those patterns of thinking and behaving that keep us trapped in suffering.
So it's about recognizing that we're not our thoughts and we don't have to be ruled by them. We have the power to choose how we respond to them.
Exactly. And the practices of yoga,
Yeah.
like controlling the breath, cultivating non-attachment, and meditating on Om, they offer us a path to cultivating that inner freedom and realizing our true potential.
And even though the path might be challenging at times, the rewards are definitely worth the effort.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even small steps in the right direction can make a huge difference in our overall well-being and happiness.
This has been a fascinating, like, deep dive into the world of yoga philosophy.
Yeah.
What else does the lecture cover? And what are some of the practical applications of these concepts in our daily lives? We'll explore all that and more in the next part of this deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
So we're back, and my mind is officially blown. I mean, seedless samadhi,
Right.
a state of pure, unbounded consciousness.
It definitely stretches the limits of our imagination.
It does, but even if we like never reach that ultimate state, the journey itself, has got to be so transformative.
Oh, for sure.
And the lecture does such a good job of like breaking down those steps along the way,
Yeah.
highlighting, those practices that can help us move towards greater clarity and inner peace.
Exactly. And one of the most powerful practices that the lecture emphasizes is cultivating positive qualities in our daily lives.
Okay.
Things like friendship, compassion, and even indifference towards negativity.
Okay, now Indifference sounds a bit harsh.
Yeah.
I mean, shouldn't we, like, care when bad things happen?
It's not about being callous or uncaring.
Right.
It's more about cultivating a sense of equanimity,
Okay.
an inner balance that allows us to weather the storms of life without getting swept away by them.
Hmm.
Think of it like a sturdy tree that can withstand strong winds because its roots are deeply grounded.
So it's about developing that, like, inner strength and resilience
Yeah,
so we can navigate challenges without, losing our sense of peace.
exactly.
I can see how that would be so helpful, especially in today's world.
For sure. And the lecture also highlights the importance of cultivating positive emotions, like compassion and loving kindness.
Hmm.
These qualities not only benefit others, but they also create a more harmonious inner environment for ourselves.
It's like that saying, what you put out into the world comes back to you.
Right.
If we cultivate kindness and compassion, we're creating a more positive ripple effect,
Exactly.
both internally and externally.
Precisely. And this brings us back to the idea of samadhi,
Okay.
that state of profound meditative absorption.
Right.
Remember, the lecture describes different types of samadhi, each with its own unique characteristics.
Right. We talked about Savichara Samadhi, which involves contemplation and reflection, and
Yeah.
Nirvichara Samadhi, which is about transcending thought altogether. But even those initial stages of Samadhi sound so challenging.
They can be.
What are some of the common pitfalls that people encounter, and, like, how can we avoid them?
Well, one common obstacle is simply the sheer busyness of our modern lives.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in that constant stream of distractions and demands,
Yeah.
leaving little time or energy for inner exploration.
It's like our minds are like those old TVs with the antennas, constantly picking up static and interference.
So, right?
It's like we're always bombarded with information and stimulation. No wonder it's hard to find that inner stillness.
It takes a conscious effort to create space for silence and stillness in our lives.
Right.
Maybe it's carving out a specific time each day for meditation,
Okay.
or incorporating mindfulness practices into our daily routines.
So it's about finding those, like, pockets of stillness throughout the day,
Yeah.
even if it's just for a few minutes at a time.
Absolutely. Another common pitfall is approaching meditation with a goal-oriented mindset.
Hmm.
We might get frustrated when we don't experience immediate results,
Right.
or when our mind wanders incessantly. It's like we're trying to force it instead of allowing it to unfold naturally.
I've definitely been there. You sit down to meditate and suddenly you're, like, mentally running through your to-do list or replaying that awkward conversation from earlier.
Right.
It's tough to let go of that need to, like, control everything.
It is. It takes practice and patience. It's important to remember that meditation is a practice, not a performance.
Right.
There will be days when it feels easy and effortless, and other days when it feels like a struggle.
Right.
The key is to just keep showing up without judgment or expectation.
So being kind to ourselves throughout the process.
Exactly.
But what about those moments when we do manage to, like, touch into that stillness, that sense of peace and clarity?
Yeah,
How do we hold on to that experience and integrate it into our daily lives?
that's a great question. One way is to simply savor those moments, allowing the positive feelings and insights to, really permeate your being. You can also try to bring that same quality of awareness and presence to your everyday activities, whether you're walking, eating, or interacting with others. It's about bridging the gap between your inner and outer worlds, letting the peace and clarity you cultivate in meditation ripple outwards into your daily life.
I love that. Letting that inner peace ripple outwards is like taking that meditative awareness off the cushion and into the real world. But the lecture also talks about these, like, advanced yogis who can supposedly control the elements and levitate and even read minds.
Right.
Are these just mythical stories, or is there, like, some truth to these claims?
It's a realm that's often shrouded in mystery and skepticism. While there are certainly many exaggerated or fabricated accounts, there's also a body of anecdotal evidence and traditional teachings that suggest the possibility of extraordinary abilities developing as a result of advanced yogic practices.
So it's not something we should just, like, dismiss out of hand, but also not something we should blindly believe without critical examination.
Exactly. It's important to approach these claims with both an open mind and a healthy dose of discernment. But ultimately, the most important question is, what's the purpose of these powers?
Right. Like, if someone could actually levitate or read minds, what would be the point? What would they do with that ability?
That's where things get really interesting, because the lecture suggests that while these powers might seem alluring, they can actually become obstacles on the path to true liberation.
Wait, really? So instead of focusing on, like, gaining superpowers, we should be focusing on something else entirely. But what would be more important than having superpowers?
Well, remember, the ultimate goal of yoga is not to gain power over the external world, but to realize our true nature as pure consciousness, free from all limitations.
So it's like we're getting sidetracked by shiny objects
Yeah.
instead of focusing on the real prize.
Exactly. And the lecture even mentions that some yogis, despite attaining these remarkable powers, fall short of true liberation because they become attached to these abilities. It's a cautionary tale that reminds us to stay focused on the ultimate goal, inner freedom and self-realization.
Wow, that's a powerful message. It's like a reminder that true power lies in inner freedom, not like external control.
Mhm.
We've been talking a lot about, individual practice and personal transformation.
Right.
But the lecture also touches on the broader implications of yoga philosophy, specifically its relevance to understanding the nature of reality itself.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is where things get really mind-bending. Yoga philosophy offers a unique perspective on the relationship between the individual self and the universe. Remember that analogy of the oyster and the pearl? It suggests that our perceived reality is just a tiny sliver of what actually is.
So there's a whole universe beyond what we can perceive with our senses. That's both exciting and a little terrifying.
It is, and
Nah.
yoga philosophy offers tools and practices to help us explore those deeper layers of reality.
Mm.
It invites us to question our assumptions about who we are and what's possible.
So it's not just about achieving personal peace and happiness,
Right.
but about expanding our understanding of the cosmos and our place within it.
Exactly. It's a journey of self-discovery that can lead us to a profound sense of interconnectedness with all that is. It's about recognizing the inherent unity beneath the apparent diversity of the universe.
That's a beautiful concept. It makes you realize that we're all part of something much bigger than ourselves.
Mm.
But how does yoga philosophy address the concept of suffering? It seems like suffering is like an inevitable part of the human experience.
You're right, suffering is a part of life. But yoga philosophy offers a unique perspective on the nature of suffering and how to transcend it.
Okay.
It suggests that much of our suffering stems from our attachment to impermanent things, our thoughts, emotions, possessions, even our bodies.
So it's that clinging and grasping
Yes,
that creates the pain.
exactly. By learning to detach from those things, to cultivate a sense of non-attachment, we can lessen our suffering and experience greater peace and freedom.
So it's about changing our relationship to suffering
Yes.
rather than trying to eliminate it altogether.
Precisely. It's about
Yeah.
recognizing that suffering is impermanent, just like everything else in the universe. It arises, it persists for a time, and then it passes away.
So it's about riding the waves of life without getting pulled under by them.
Exactly. And yoga philosophy provides us with the tools and practices to do just that.
This has been a fascinating exploration of the deeper dimensions of yoga philosophy. We've covered a lot of ground, from the nature of mind and consciousness to the challenges and rewards of the path to samadhi. We've also touched on the broader implications of yoga for understanding the nature of reality and the human condition, but there's still so much more to explore.
Yeah.
What else does the lecture cover, and what are some practical takeaways we can apply to our daily lives?
Well, there's definitely more to uncover.
Okay.
The lecture dives into some intriguing connections between yoga philosophy and modern science. And it offers some really practical advice on how to integrate these ancient teachings into our modern lives.
Okay, now that's something I'm really curious about.
Yeah.
I'm eager to hear how those ancient ideas can be applied to the challenges we face today.
Me too. We'll delve into all that and more in the final part of this deep dive.
So we're back for the final part of our deep dive into yoga philosophy. I'm really excited to explore how these ancient teachings can be applied to our modern lives.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially the intersection of yoga and science.
Right. It's fascinating how modern science is starting to kind of catch up with what yogis have known for centuries. For example, neuroscience is now confirming the profound impact of meditation on the brain.
Really? So it's not just some woo-woo spiritual thing. There's actual scientific evidence to back it up.
Absolutely. Studies have shown that regular meditation can actually change the structure and function of the brain,
Wow.
leading to, increased gray matter in areas associated with attention, emotional regulation, self-awareness.
That's incredible. It's we can actually rewire our brains for greater peace and well-being.
Exactly. And this is just one example of how science is starting to validate the ancient wisdom of yoga. Another interesting area of overlap is in the field of quantum physics.
Okay, quantum physics. Now, that's a rabbit hole I'm not sure I'm ready to go down.
Right.
But, how does it relate to yoga?
Well, quantum physics challenges our classical understanding of reality. It suggests that the universe is not a collection of separate, solid objects, but a web of interconnected energy fields.
So kind of like that interconnectedness we were talking about earlier, how like everything is ultimately connected.
Exactly. And this idea resonates really deeply with the yogic concept of unity consciousness. The idea that beneath the apparent diversity of the universe, there's this fundamental oneness.
It's like we're all part of this grand, like cosmic dance.
Beautifully put. And what's even more mind-blowing is that quantum physics suggests that consciousness itself plays a role in shaping reality.
Wait, you telling me that my thoughts can actually influence like the world around me?
It's a pretty radical concept, but some physicists believe that our observations and intentions can actually collapse the wave function of possibilities into, actual events.
Whoa, that's heavy stuff. So if I like focus my thoughts on positive outcomes, I can actually increase the likelihood of those outcomes manifesting.
It's an intriguing possibility that's still being explored.
Right.
But it definitely aligns with the yogic principle of karma, the idea that our actions and intentions create like ripples in the fabric of reality.
So it's like we have a responsibility to use our thoughts and actions wisely because they have real consequences.
Exactly. And this brings us back to like the practical application of yoga philosophy in our daily lives.
Right.
The lecture offers some great advice on how to integrate these ancient teachings into our, modern routines.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
What are some like actionable steps we can take to bring more yoga wisdom into our lives?
Well, one simple but powerful practice is to cultivate a sense of gratitude. Just taking a few moments each day to really appreciate the good things in our lives,
Right.
can shift our focus from scarcity to abundance and boost our overall well-being.
I love that. It's so easy to get caught up in the negative, but focusing on the positive can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Another practical tip is to practice mindfulness throughout the day.
Hmm.
This could involve paying attention to your breath while you're walking, eating mindfully, or simply taking a few moments to, like, pause and notice the sensations in your body.
It's like those mini meditation breaks we were talking about earlier,
Yeah,
bringing that awareness into those everyday moments.
exactly. And the lecture also emphasizes the importance of cultivating compassion,
Okay.
both for ourselves and others. This could involve, practicing loving kindness meditation or simply making an effort to be more understanding and forgiving in our interactions.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity and like treating each other with kindness and respect.
Precisely. And even small acts of kindness can ripple outwards, creating a more positive and compassionate world.
This has been like such an incredible deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of, yoga philosophy and its relevance to like my life.
Oh, that's great to hear.
So before we wrap up, is there like one final takeaway, one nugget of wisdom that you think listeners should hold on to?
I think the biggest takeaway is that yoga is more than just a physical practice. It's a really profound system of self-discovery and transformation that offers tools and practices for cultivating, greater peace, clarity, and purpose in our lives.
It's a path of awakening to our true potential.
Beautifully said. And the beauty of it is that it's a journey that anyone can embark on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your, wisdom and insights with us.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, we encourage you to continue exploring these ideas and see how they resonate with your own like experiences. Maybe this deep dive has sparked a curiosity to learn more about, yoga philosophy, or even like try out some of the practices that we've discussed. Remember, the journey of self-discovery is an ongoing process, and every step we take towards greater awareness and understanding is a step in the right direction. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.